Wildcard playoffs, some really good games, some blowout games. What did we learn from the wildcard playoffs as it pertains to the San Francisco 49ers? And special teams coordinator interviews a familiar last name, a new first name, though, for a potential new coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you, as always. Back again, actually. It was a little while. We weren't together to start this new year, but we are with you right now at BD Peacock, at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love our everydayers out there. Appreciate you. And welcome to the new listeners. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up. Let us know you're here, because a lot of listeners, I've learned, we never hear from them. So let's hear from you. Just hit the little thumbs up. Let us know that you're hanging out and you're listening. And we appreciate you for it. Of course, you can subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you listen to this audio version of the podcast. In today's episode of Locked On 49ers, presented by FanDuel, a big return right now on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose that first $5 bet. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, I want to talk about the wildcard playoffs, Croc. And we'll talk about some of the games. And obviously the 49ers aren't playing, so we're not going to dive too deep into these games. But something I was not thinking about while these games were happening was, like Brock Purdy. I wasn't watching Jaden Daniels and thinking about Brock Purdy. I wasn't watching Justin Herbert or Josh Allen and thinking about Brock Purdy. But, on my timeline and people mentioning me, it's like, look, Brock Purdy can do this. Brock Purdy can't do this. Oh, look, Brock Purdy's great because of what we saw from this player. Brock Purdy is not this, can't pay him this because of what we saw from this player in the playoffs. And I think some people maybe just have 49ers on the brain too much, which is weird to say from two people, right? That, or at least one person, I don't know if you agree with me, Croc, that does a San Francisco 49ers podcast every single day, that I don't look at everything through a 49ers lens and a Brock Purdy lens, but it's kind of setting up what this offseason is going to be like with the conversations and the thought process from the people who think about the 49ers and talk about the 49ers and the content creators, because even watching the Chargers, people think about Brock Purdy, right? Just watching the Bills, they're like, oh, what's this make me think about Brock Purdy? And me personally, I didn't think about Brock Purdy, but a lot of people were thinking about Brock Purdy watching these playoff games, Croc. Did you think
the only time I probably would think about Brock Purdy is watching Sam Darnold tomorrow.
Right.
And that's because his name has come up. And then when I say tomorrow, today, if you're listening to this Monday morning,
Monday night
live right now, Sunday evening, but Sam Darnold's name has come up on this podcast, just kind of throwing it out there. And obviously Sam Darnold was a 49er quarterback. So Sam Darnold, that'll probably be the first time that I look at any of these games and have Brock Purdy on my mind.
I think if we are to think about Brock Purdy, and so seeing people talk about it, and people are tagging me on social media, and even some texts I got from some friends, now forced to think about Brock Purdy as it pertains to some of these playoff teams. Did you watch Justin Herbert and the Chargers struggle and think, man, Brock Purdy should get more than Justin Herbert because he's better at operating in a certain area of the field where Justin Herbert was not able to operate in a playoff game? Or did you look at the Buffalo Bills and think, well, the injured 49ers, we've talked so much about how the 49ers were so beat up this year. The injured 49ers offense hasn't been really any better or any worse than what Josh Allen had to begin with healthy on offense for the Buffalo Bills. So you start talking about a player that's going to be paid at the top of the market. How can you pay Brock Purdy compared to a guy like Josh Allen, who is carrying his team into playoff wins, and he doesn't have more talent on his offense with the broken down 49ers, in my opinion. So if you do look at these playoff teams and the Saturday, Sunday games in particular, through a Brock Purdy, through a San Francisco 49ers lens, do you think that if you're basing Brock Purdy's market versus those quarterbacks, does it change your opinion? Is there any conclusions you can draw there?
No, it's tough because I think it's kind of all over the place, and everybody's situation is different. And I think for Brock Purdy, that's been a big part of the conversation. In previous years, the first 2 years of him playing with the 49ers, a big part of it is he plays with the Avengers. So you'd hear that from the outsiders or the naysayers about how good the weapons were. And I know, if 49er fans want to be defensive of that, or even myself, well, that's his situation. It kind of is what it is. And if he continues to play at this level with these guys, then he's going to be expected to, get paid a certain amount of money. Now, I will say this year, I've probably been able to look at this team's situation through maybe a slightly different lens than other people. I think a lot of people watch these games by the 49ers and understood the situation. You don't have Christian McCaffrey out there. You lost Brandon Ayuk early in the season. There were several other injuries. You end up having to play without your left tackle. And it was definitely not an ideal situation for Brock Purdy. But my biggest thing is a lot of the people that talked about him having the Avengers, he still had some talented players out there on the field and guys that were able to be productive. And I felt like the situation he dealt with, it wasn't normal from the standpoint of just the off the field things and the emotions that went into it with some of the players were dealing with. But as far as just your talent on the field, it was more comparable to kind of what other quarterbacks deal with around the league. And I don't know if he handled that necessarily well. Like, not everybody's going to have the number one defense every year or top 5 defense every year, which he had his first year. Not everyone is going to have, several all-pro players and great offensive line protection and a great running back, and most of them should be MVP of the league. Like, not everybody has that. Most everyone deals with a roster that is more similar to what Brock Purdy played with this season. And from that standpoint, he had opportunities to still figure out a way to come out on top. And in some key moments, it didn't work out quite as well. So, if I'm negotiating, how much money he should get paid, or if I'm someone that has been waiting for Brock Purdy to come down to earth, I think they'll probably use this season as something to reference, because it probably didn't go as well as he would have liked, even with, the injuries and things that he dealt with.
Yeah. And really, to put it simply, it's like, okay, things go great when everything around you is great. Good. Well, we need to be able to keep things great around you. So we can't pay you X, because if we do, it's going to look a lot more like this year. And when you needed to throw to win games, we weren't able to do it. And I love the quote from Fred Warner, and he was asked on ESPN NFL Countdown about Brock Purdy, and if there's any doubt about him being the long-term guy, the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. And he said, quote, "Not at all. Brock Purdy, he's the man. He will be the 49ers quarterback for a very, very long time with plenty of Super Bowl rings on his hand." Fred Warner talking about Super Bowl rings for Brock Purdy with the San Francisco 49ers. And look, I don't know if you can always get the best information from players. There's something I've talked about a lot on here, where you're like, oh, well, let's go ask the players about themselves or the guy next to them. I don't know if you ever get really the best. We used to hear the same stuff about Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's the same thing about, people are like, oh, Brock Purdy, EPA per play. I'm like, okay, well, let's bring up the old EPA per play with Jimmy Garoppolo, top 2, top 3 in the NFL, top 1 in the NFL, EPA per play. Like, so something we talked about off the air, Croc, and it's the eyes. Like, I think we kind of know what Brock Purdy is. And that bad injured 49ers team this year that could barely muster 6 wins, that was the same talent that Justin Herbert had, and they were in the playoffs and didn't look great in the playoffs. It's the same talent that Josh Allen had, and he was talked about as an MVP candidate, right?
I just talked about Jaden Daniels, right? And again, this was just because I wasn't watching the game thinking about Brock, but as we were preparing to record, we kind of brought certain things up. It's Terry McLaurin and whoever the hell else, Jaden Daniels is playing with. But, if that's what you're playing with, and you hope guys step up. That's just what your situation is. And, Jaden Daniels did a terrific job, at least this year, and being able to, will his team to a postseason win. And there were times where they were riding high. There were times where it wasn't as great, but they figured out a way to bang out some wins. And, we talk about just the talent with the 49ers. Like, most teams would still be like, hey, man, we're still able to run for, 100 yards in this game. Still got George Kittle, who is an all-pro again. You still got, you got a first-round rookie receiver who started to come on a little bit later in the season. You got Juwan Jennings, who had his best season of his career. And Debo, while taking a step back, there were still times where he was able to, he had a few, very productive games. So there should have been enough, especially since you had the opportunities to end up in the postseason. Now, you get in the postseason, you're not at full strength. Maybe you get bounced right out. But I still think you're viewed a little different, if you will, that team, when you kind of had a lot of things going against you. And I know for me, at least, it didn't change how I view Brock, but I think it just let me know, like, okay, I just know what he is. And what I would be comfortable with paying that guy. And that's not to say that this guy is bad or anything, right? Like, I think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback. But how good is he? And you watch, like Baker Mayfield. This whole time, and I was referencing on this podcast, I kept thinking Baker Mayfield got like $43 to $45 million per year. He's making $33 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, is Brock 2 times more money better than Baker Mayfield was this year, where he threw 41 touchdowns and 16 picks? Like, is he worth double the amount of money that you would pay Baker?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it starts to get really difficult. I want to continue this conversation a little bit. I got one more thought on Brock Purdy with the 49ers, and then tie it into the playoffs. And of course, Zane Gonzalez, a familiar name for San Francisco 49ers fans, making playoff kicks with doinks. We've got so much more from the Wildcard playoff weekend that was, and Jett Modkins interviewed as the special teams coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. Coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers presented by LinkedIn Jobs. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. And small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, and LinkedIn knows this. So every hire is crucial, and LinkedIn gets it. And that's why they connect you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else, from unique skills and interests to the connections you share. 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helped them find high quality candidates. So hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. What are the skills, the candidates you're looking for? You can get connected to them on LinkedIn, and they will help you feel confident that you are finding the right candidates when you pull the trigger. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. Even if your team is not still in the tournament, you can still have a lot of fun, and that's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money, watching the games and playing along with the games and using your knowledge and your sports opinions to cash with daily fantasy player projections, then PrizePicks is the place for you. With PrizePicks, all you do, it's super easy. You simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. And you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. And here's a special offer for our Locked On listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. So, Croc, just to wrap up the Brock Purdy portion of this podcast, and it's not something I thought I was going to be talking about today, but I saw so many people talking about it. Jordan Love's another name I didn't mention earlier. I saw it in the chat, and people are like, "Oh, well, people saying that Jordan Love's better than Brock Purdy. You can erase that because of one bad game here in the playoffs." And I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I think it's game to game, week to week. Like quarterbacks are going to lay eggs. Quarterbacks are going to look great. You still have to build a team around that quarterback. For me, with the 49ers, whether you're going to put the focus on Brock Purdy or not, when the 49ers needed to throw the ball, they weren't good at doing it. Late in games, when the defense needed to stop late in games, they weren't good at doing it. When the 49ers really needed to run the ball and close out games, they weren't good at doing it. So when the opposing offense or defense against the 49ers knew what the Niners needed to do, they were good at not allowing the Niners to do it. And that's where I come back to with this season with the 49ers is, man, it's great when you have the entire playbook at your disposal and you want to run the ball or throw the ball on first down and the game's tied and you've got all this time this field to operate but like all of a sudden, okay, things get pretty tight and it's like, okay, well, the defense knows, guess what? You think Kirby Joseph had maybe a little idea that the 49ers might run a dig, right? A little backside dig. They might run that route. Kirby Joseph was like, dude, I already know what's coming. I can't wait for you to throw that. Jumps up, makes an interception. It was the most flat-footed, easy interception I've ever seen in my life from Kirby Joseph against the San Francisco 49ers a couple weeks ago.
Okay. I'll give that's tough. Okay, I've been learning a lot of offense, right? Okay. I'm actually going to be the offensive coordinator at my high school coaching.
Are you calling plays?
Yeah, calling plays.
What?
Yeah. It was like, I had certain things in place and there were certain things up in the air. And I said, I don't like the feeling of that. So I'm going to call the offense. And
Did they interview anybody? Did they interview anybody else before they gave you that job?
I'm the head coach. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan got in trouble because he tried to give the job to Clay Kubiak and they said, no, NFL said, no, you can't do that. You got to interview people from outside the organization, apparently. So be careful, Croc.
Yeah. But what I was getting to was, especially with that interception, one thing that we have built into this offense that I'm running and is a little bit more air raid style. There's some pure progressions, right? And what I've been working on with my quarterback and how he's reading the opposing defense, which, first of all, being a defensive guy has helped me so much with being able to call plays. It's really kind of like stealing candy from a baby. But when a lot of it's pure progressions, and there are certain things where my guy is going to look. If he sees color, then he goes to this. And when Brock is reading the defense and you see color, which is a safety standing in the middle of the field, then you have to go to the next read. And he didn't do it. So I do, I get it. People want to kind of put that on Kyle Shanahan because some of the stuff that he wants to do is predictable. But if your quarterback's reading the field the way he's supposed to, then that still isn't a throw that he should make.
It's just we kind of talked about this earlier in the season when the big conversation was about audibles and who's making the calls and let your quarterback make the calls at the line of scrimmage. I don't know what the right answer is. Just fix it. And if that means you can't pay your quarterback top dollar, or if you should pay your quarterback top dollar, you need to change some other things. Whatever it is, just fix it and figure it out. And there were just too many things wrong with the San Francisco 49ers. You can't put it all on injuries. You can't put it all on one thing or the other. You can't put it all on special teams. You can't put it all on Jake Moody. It was a collection of things. So whatever it is, fix it. And that's why we're going to have the Peacock plan coming up this week on Locked On 49ers and what my plan would be for the San Francisco 49ers in the 2025 offseason. We're going to talk about free agents. We're going to talk about the draft, of course, and so much other stuff. As pointed out in the chat here, though, Niners legend Zane Gonzalez with the doink. And I don't know. I just think that's hilarious that that you have a rookie quarterback winning a game. By the way, can I bring this up? Because we're going to do a lot of scouting. And I know a lot of fans roll their eyes. You talk about, defensive lineman. He's kind of got short arms, so maybe you can't draft him in the first round or whatever. Did you see I don't know how much does Jaden Daniels weigh? He looks like he weighs about 185.
205, maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm giving him 205 because he's like 6'3".
Yeah. Did you see him just shrug off a defensive tackle? Now, Kalijah Cansey's not the heaviest defensive tackle either, but if you want to know why you want to have a defensive lineman with long arms, it's so a quarterback can't just say, "Nope, sorry. Here's my hand to your face, and I'm going to go get the biggest first down of my life and go kick a field goal and beat you in a playoff game," right? With no time left on the clock. And Kalijah Cansey with his short arms is like, I can't grab him. You know what I mean? He gets his towel. And so it like all this stuff matters, right? And I just, it's something that really struck me when I was watching the end of that game. Zane Gonzalez field goal aside, I was like, you know what? There's a reason, because I know a lot of people roll their eyes when you start doing, really in-depth draft stuff. You start talking about arm length. You're like, really? Does that matter? Offensive tackles, does it matter? It matters, man, because if the other guy can get his hands into your body, you're going to lose that battle more times than not.
I always like to say you don't need something until you need it, right? And a lot of times when I throw that out there, it's a quarterback and arm strength, but right there, that's a great example of it. There's probably plenty of times where he's able to go and just get the quarterback and bring him down because he's so close to him. But then there's this one instance where scouts are taking this into account, chasing somebody down, especially somebody that may be a little bit faster than you. Can you change the angle? Can you grab them a certain way? And you just get stiff arm to the ground. You got them little T-Rex arms. It's not ideal.
The Packers were garbage. Jordan Love was bad, 3 interceptions. The Packers looked like a team that had either not played all year, like it was a preseason game, or had played like 3 days ago. I can't figure out which one it was. But from the opening kickoff, you basically give the Eagles a touchdown right off the bat, right? And they had an opportunity to get back in the game against the Eagles too, because I don't think the Eagles were that amazing, but the Packers look like a team that didn't want to win a playoff game. That's got to be frustrating if you're a Packers fan. I don't think anybody listening to this podcast feels bad about that, because that's a team that obviously a lot of 49ers fans love to hate. But they look like they shouldn't even have got off the bus in that game. To lay that much of an egg in January is rough.
The Packers have looked like a weird team all season long. And remember that, for half of last season too, they just got hot the second half of the season. Then they went into Dallas, destroyed them, and then played the 49ers down to the wire. But, this season has been really weird. One of their players, I think Keyshawn Nixon, talked about, the 49ers are dealing with, everybody's like, they're dealing with all these injuries. And he's like, dude, we had to play multiple games without our quarterback, and we still found a way to win. So we don't want to hear about injuries. But even after that, I don't think Jordan Love was the healthiest this season, and he's dealing with like an elbow injury heading into this game. It was just a very clunky, that's the word for it, a very clunky season for the Green Bay Packers this year. And every time I watched them, I didn't see like a playoff team. Like I never watched them and said, damn, they're pretty good. Like even the Washington Commanders, you'd watch games and just think, man, like they're going to be a problem. And there were games they started kind of letting some games go, didn't finish the strongest part they would have liked, but they were clearly a playoff team, and they had a really good win just now against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But there were games where you watched and you said, "That's clearly this is a playoff team. Like they are good, especially when they get it going. That quarterback, he's doing some special things." I never got that sense watching the Packers at all throughout the entirety of this season, except for maybe against the 49ers and Brian Allen, that quarterback.
Not a ton of other takeaways here. The Bills thumped the Broncos. The Texans had a really nice game against the Chargers. It was awesome to see D'Amico Ryans go advance, and it really looked like a better football team than they looked at times this year. And CJ Stroud had a really nice game there. The AFC is just a juggernaut with how many great quarterbacks and those football teams. I think it's good that the 49ers are in the NFC right now with what the AFC is dealing with as far as star power and their quarterbacks. And you got Stroud versus Mahomes and Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson next week. That's a tough tournament to win on that side of the things in the NFL, and obviously the Ravens thumping the Steelers as well, and the Steelers looked like a really not a good football team down the stretch, and so I wasn't really too surprised. I predicted a big win for the Ravens in that one. And then we got Vikings Rams, which I think should be a pretty good one and potentially one of the better games of the weekend, as the Commanders Buccaneers was. That was a really good football game. But Croc, next I want to talk about Jett Modkins. And he is the son of former 49ers offensive coordinator Curtis Modkins, and he has been interviewed as the special teams coordinator. We'll get into that next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because guess what? You can win some money and it just makes it a little bit more fun. And also right now, new customers can get a little free cash to play with at FanDuel. All you have to do is bet $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose on that first $5 bet. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, so much more, whether it's NFL football, NFL draft props, which I absolutely love. And I think it's one of the best advantages you can get if you really follow the draft on a sports book like FanDuel. And of course, NBA, NHL, and all of it. You can find all that action at FanDuel. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So Jett Modkins has been interviewed by the San Francisco 49ers for their vacant special teams coordinator position. And I love this interview, not because his name is Jett with 2 T's, by the way. Jett Modkins, solid name. And not because he's the son of former 49ers offensive coordinator Curtis Modkins, and it's a name that I'd kind of forgotten because I'd tried to forget as much as I could about the Chip Kelly era of the San Francisco 49ers. And Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator in reality for the San Francisco 49ers, but his OC, at least in title, was Curtis Modkins when in 2016 for the San Francisco 49ers. So Curtis Modkins' son, Jett Modkins, I believe he's only 29 years old, a very young coach, but well thought of in NFL circles. And he is the assistant special teams coordinator, Croc, for the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions, by the way, had the top rank, the number 1 special teams in the NFL, according to DVOA this season. And I don't know if Jett Modkins is going to get the job, but just from a fact-finding perspective, Croc, I go find the team that's doing it the best and see if you can learn something as to why they're doing it the best.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the NFL is a copycat league. And with special teams, the 49ers has been up and down. Hey, somebody had pointed out Green Bay Packers, special teams, bad. Well, they've kind of been bad. And I remember a couple years ago, 49ers and Green Bay were playing. It was almost like battle of the bad special teams units. So this has been something that's plagued a couple teams in the NFL. And if I am a team, I'm going to a squad and saying, all right, I can't get your main guy, but let me get the next guy who has been in every single meeting. I talked about that with the 49ers and, having Robert Saleh. And, a lot of people weren't quite realizing this, but DeMeco Ryans, he came in to the 49ers situation with Kyle Shanahan, with Robert Saleh in 2017. So for 3 years or 4 years, however long Saleh was there, this was a guy who was involved in every single meeting. So when Robert Saleh moved on, guess what? DeMeco Ryans was able and ready to take over. And you look at a situation like this with Detroit, where their special teams coordinator, like when you're a special teams coordinator, that's kind of what you're going to be, unless you get a head coaching job, which that happened with the guy that went to the New York Giants as the head coach a few years back. Can't think of his name. Anyways,
the guy he changed his hairdo.
That might be him, but they had a special teams. He was a special teams coordinator. And they hired him as a head coach.
You're talking about Joe Judge, yeah, Joe Judge.
Joe Judge, yeah. You typically don't see special teams
back his hair. Who's the coach that slicked back his hair? He showed up and he was like, "I got a new look. I'm a new man." And he was
that looked crazy.
I can't remember who that guy was, but yeah, Joe Judge is who you're talking about.
Yeah, but typically you don't see that except for like kind of the Joe Judge situation and whatnot. But special teams coordinators, they're almost like defensive linemen. Like it's like they're just meant to be defensive linemen. Special team coordinators, they're meant to be special teams coordinators. And if you have an assistant one, because that head guy is probably not going anywhere. If I'm the 49ers, let me holler at Jett Modkins real quick and listen in on some of their philosophies. And hey, watch our special teams unit. Can you break this down for me? What are you seeing? What would you do differently? And I think that's how I'll go about it. So I like, at the very least, the 49ers, I think they're sniffing around the right tree.
And there's a lot of people talking about, special teams and the kickers and Zane Gonzalez making a kick and Jake Moody. And I get that. But special teams, to me, it's a lot more than the kicking game. The kicking game, you got to find the right guys, obviously. And I think Jake Moody might be a real good kicker in the NFL. I think it's just you're kind of doing a player dirty by drafting him so high, because you just make the microscope on him just that much more intense by everyone expecting even more from a player because of how high he's drafted, on top of how difficult it is for young kickers in the NFL, because a lot of great kickers takes them a while to become great kickers in the NFL. And generally teams don't draft kickers, and that's just not how you find kickers. And so, maybe someone like Jett Modkins or whoever the new special teams coordinator could come in and be a kicker whisperer and help out the kicking game. But I think it's more about the coverage units too, which the 49ers have had some problems with, right? And that's the big thing for me, because if you got the wrong kicker and maybe he misses some kicks, I don't know how you can predict that. It's going to be tough, and you just got to try to find the best kicker you can and try to feel comfortable about it, and maybe find a veteran kicker that you can trust, at least someone to compete with Moody. But some of the breakdowns we've seen, and some of the fake punts and stuff that the 49ers that have happened to the 49ers, that's the stuff to me that they've really got to clean up. And that's where a special teams coordinator comes in.
Definitely. Like kind of just the preparation and making sure that, guys are very efficient with what they're doing with the special teams unit. And I think a lot of people, you go to a practice, especially a 49ers training camp practice, right? You're watching the offense, you're watching the defense. How many people are paying attention to the special teams portion of that? But it's very important. And I think, when you're actually watching the game, you see like a breakdown. I think those are the times where it jumps out, and, who is to blame for that? Where these guys taught this. There's a lot of things you can watch on film and say, did this guy just do that? Or is this something that he's being taught to do? And if he's being taught to do, then that's the teacher's issue. Mm-hmm. And that's when maybe you need to find a different guy. So when things just happen over and over again with the 49ers, and you're seeing just issues continue to arise with a certain unit, heads got to roll.
And I know that, the time that coaches have with players has been dialed back over the years. Do the 49ers practice special teams enough? I have no idea. I'm not there. I don't watch practice. We get to watch a couple of practices every year at training camp when we go, Croc. They never work on special teams when we're there. They kick a couple balls, and that's it. It's like, judging by that, the 49ers would have the worst special teams in the NFL because they don't practice it. And it was like, I don't know. How do you get good at that? Because they don't practice it almost at all.
I think they do practice it. I don't think people pay attention when they are, because they've done. I've watched them do kickoff return drills, and you see the guys get back, find their ankles.
3 plays. It's less than the warmups when Kyle Shanahan's playing quarterback and throwing to the first team defense. Right?
I agree.
It's hardly any time at all. So I wonder if that's something. I don't think Kyle Shanahan wants to give up offense or defensive coaching time during practice to spend on special teams, but maybe it's a necessary evil, or at least a necessary at the beginning to build a base for whoever your new special teams coordinator. I'm just asking the question. I have no idea. But I know that they don't have unlimited coaching time to get into the depths of some things. And I wonder if special teams is one of the things that's like, we'll spend the least amount of time possible on this and hope it's still good. And we'll spend a couple draft picks on some kickers, and maybe that'll do the trick. Hasn't done the trick so far for the 49ers. One more quick note from me, Croc. And I always want to say this because the Brock Purdy conversation gets so crazy. We started talking about Brock Purdy at the beginning of this pod. I want to end it there as well. And there's a comment in the chat about Brock Purdy. The thing I hate about the Brock Purdy conversation is I know we both feel this way, and you said it a little bit ago, but I want to reiterate it. We both think Brock Purdy's really good. And so whenever we get into the conversation about how much he's getting paid and talking about paying him as much as Lamar Jackson makes, it sounds like you're bad mouthing Brock Purdy and you're saying he's not a good quarterback. We think Brock Purdy's a really good quarterback. I just think it's asinine to be like, oh, of course he's going to make $60 million a year. Of course he should be paid at the elite level of quarterbacks. I think that's kind of crazy. I also think it's absolutely asinine and insane that he should be making $900,000 a year too, as a quarterback that's leading your team to a Super Bowl, right? And so I just think there's just a realistic place that we could live in with Brock Purdy, that it doesn't sound like we're bad mouthing him just because we think he should be paid $45 million a year instead of $60 million a year. That's all I'm saying.
And it's not just him. There are other quarterbacks that it's like, well, I would have never paid Tua $55 million a year.
And that's
and I don't think Tua is terrible, but there's no world where I'm like, all right, like Tua $55 million a year. Like, I feel comfortable with that. And Jordan Love right now. Here's the question: when these guys get paid this amount, because once once Brock gets paid, there's going to be an added set of expectations that's put
Just
on
like
him.
Jake Moody getting drafted in the 3rd round. You're a $900,000 quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant. People are like, oh, hell yeah, dude. You start making big time money and people can start looking at you different. That's the reality.
If Brock had this season and was getting paid $60 million a year, people wouldn't care about the injuries and the things that guys were dealing with off the field. They would hammer Brock. I mean, people were already kind of like, some people were waiting for him to have, again, this come to earth moment, but it would be 10 times worse if he was making 60 million. So, and that's not to say that he shouldn't get paid handsomely, but again, there are certain guys that are making a lot of money, and just because you're the next person up to get paid, to me, doesn't mean I'm going to pay you that amount. Now, and how you work around that, we'll talk about that later in this week, because I think that should be there's going to be real contract negotiations going on, but nobody here on this show is saying, oh, Brock Purdy is a terrible quarterback, get him out of here. Like, no, absolutely not. He's a good quarterback. How good? And again, is he worth almost 2 times as much money as Baker Mayfield? And that's what I would have a hard time. Well, okay, Baker's making $33 million a year. So, is there a happy median between $33 million a year and having to pay somebody, more than Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and all those guys? Like, I would feel very uncomfortable putting that on Brock.
Plenty more to come this offseason on Brock Purdy. A really important offseason for the San Francisco 49ers. The Peacock plan upcoming this week. My plan for the San Francisco 49ers offseason, what I think they should do. We're going to talk about free agents that the 49ers have upcoming this offseason, who's going to stay, who's going to go, NFL draft, and a whole lot more. So make sure you stick with us every single day here on Locked On 49ers. Subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And Croc and I back tomorrow, right here, Locked On 49ers.